Welcome back to this episode of Uncover the Human. We are joined this week with our guest, Bill Powell. Welcome to the podcast, Bill.
Hey, great to be here.
Hey, nice to have you.
So, Bill, let us know a little bit about yourself. We've gotten to talk to you a couple times, but not everybody has gotten the chance. What's up?
Well, what's up? I'm just some guy with a telephone. No, I just, it's like everyone else trying to make it with a quantum computer in their pocket, I guess.
Getting radiation through your ear. Yeah,
that's right. That's what Bluetooth and hands-free is for, right? No, but grew up St. Louis, Missouri. Proud Missouri native, and kind of headed off to college, to Kenyon College in Ohio, and realized quickly that I needed to learn another foreign language quickly. That in fact, that connectivity with other people was important to me, communication, relations, and that how could I live my whole life with only knowing one language? And I'd grown up in a pseudo bilingual home with German grandparents, where I was the baby and they spoke to me in German from the age of 6. And so I set off on this mission to be trilingual by the age of 30, and I hit it along the way. I ended up getting a job in Deutsche Bank on Wall Street, and because I spoke French and German, and then went on to a series of startups. Did my master's in Paris, a series of fintech and tech startups in Scandinavia, in Stockholm, Sweden, and then back 2-year. We were going to take a sabbatical, my wife and I. She's Swedish, and we were like, oh, let's go to Denver. Our family's there, and let's take a year or two off. 19 years later, we're still in Denver. This it doesn't really feel like a sabbatical anymore.
Quite the sabbatical.
It's quite the sabbatical. Sometimes it kind of feels like that still, but and had a chance to, over the years, to just really work with some amazing people and learn from them. A lot of master builder and builder types and other thinker doers, and perform due diligence on private equity, venture capital, renewable energy type investments, and then start to expand those investments across my own portfolio and those of others over time. And so now I'm a partner at Black Lab X up in Boulder, also the local known as Black Lab Sports, where we're really trying to hyper enable and inspire greatness in others around us in order to help propel humanity forward. And so that's feels like some really meaningful work to me around human potential, and in areas like vitality and longevity and consciousness. We can dig into that later on. That can be a lot of things, and community and environment, because we want to make sure it's broad enough. I'm a liberal arts guy, so the category needs to be significantly broad enough, and then really think with a people first approach. A lot of people who invest, they talk about deal flow. We don't talk about that. We talk about people flow and people's values. That's who I am in a nutshell, and what I'm up to these days.
Just a little bit. just a tiny little nutshell. Yes, I love the people flow piece. I wish all businesses thought that way instead of deal flow, people flow.
Yeah. That's especially an interesting angle for investment. That tends to be, like you're saying, a lot of deal flow, a lot of structure around what's the ROI on this. What led you into some of the more people first flow, and what does that mean, like day to day?
What led me in that direction? I think it kind of started back when I was taking value-based leadership classes at the University of Denver at Daniels, and I was in my early 30s, and I thought, why do people's values are set already by the time? Why are they giving us this coursework, right? Why I did all this political philosophy and stuff and before, and then lo and behold, down the road, when you start to see why early stage companies, were a space I've been in for about 20 years, why do they fail? It's usually because of people. And where's the breakdown? Is it because it's the lack of complementary skill sets? Sometimes, but most of the time it has to do with the difference in people's root definitions of right and wrong, values, the things that our parents taught us, what's good, what's bad. And I realized I started to get clued in, a decade and a half later after having studied this and being like, why are we really, that, oh my gosh, that's really why a lot of companies don't work, why people break down, because suddenly they get traction and something called avarice or greed kind of enters the equation. Oh, we can make money. Wait a minute. I should have more. You should have less. Wait a minute. We should renegotiate that. And then was it Maya Angelou who said, people show you their true colors. You better believe it.
Yeah, first time.
Right. And so, and that's where I started to key in over the years. Like I saw this pattern process, even they're really good companies and other companies fail. Why? And many times because of the people, right? And not because of the skill sets necessarily, but the values. And so people having like a people first approach or thinking about the flow of people, it's kind of like when you were a kid and your parents said, hey, you be careful. You are who you run around with, right? Remember that? And
yeah.
So, and it's funny how this just keeps coming back. And so that people first, it can mean people with amazing domain expertise in something, but also with amazing value systems that are also different maybe than mine, but highly complementary to what mine is. And we look for that across groups of people. And that's really powerful when you can kind of capture that type of lightning in a jar.
What do you see breaks down? So is it that they find out that their values are different, that their true values come out later, a combination of both, that there's an assumption of values, and then when the money comes in and it's time for greed, something else shifts?
Wow, that's a lot.
All of the above.
I'm like, as you asked the question, I'm thinking of like chapters in the book. Anyway, like Christina, it's gonna be a long podcast.
we don't like talking about values.
No, not at all.
All the time.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. No, there's no, well, at least for me, I mean, people are unique individuals. You can always try to group people in categories and think, okay, whatever. Everybody's unique, and they have to be their own authentic self, and whoever or that they are, right? And it can be highly situational too, right? There can be exogenous, in certain situations, it can be truly exogenous factors that just push things out of a degree of comfort in terms of zones, right? So like, major, like, 3-4 standard deviation type events that occur exogenously in the economy. And that I mean, it's tough for a lot of people to get through those together. You start to really test your mettle, right? And then there's the other side where it's a good times type of economy and things start to take off and somebody's like, wow, I can get more than you. Okay. Whew. All right. And that's, in some cases, of course, this is very natural because somebody's actually earned more, they put in more, or someone else is more into, they're more committed to this and hey, that's typically in those situations, it doesn't lead to like anything like a negative breakdown in relationships. In fact, it can be very positive and liberating. But there's the other side of this where it breaks down and those companies actually that can reconcile those differences, they probably have better value systems or closer to one another, right? They understand the fit of self and problem and themselves within a group of people because they're thinking, you know what, this is something more than just one of us. So yes, that's fine. I can make this change. It's when people, it's a degree of ego kind of steps in where, I can't be replaced or I could make more money if you're not here, that type of thing. That's where it kind of breaks down sometimes. Just to be more, general about it, but kind of tie that off a little too. I mean, it's each case is unique, right? There's a really good book out there by a guy named Noam Wasserman called The Founder's Dilemma.
Oh, yeah.
And it's
We read that.
and yeah, it's all those vignettes, right? And boy, yeah, and there's a lot more to it than just some of the soft things I mentioned there already, in my opinion.
You talk about doing like due diligence and finding these things out. Are there indicators you've come to look for, or where it might be a mismatch later? I mean, if it comes in externally, sometimes I imagine that's hard to see before it happens.
Yeah, it is really hard to see. It depends. Yeah, it depends. It's like the economist says, on the one hand, but on the other, when you think about it, it's a very unsatisfying answer. But truly, there are, I think, tend to see people who over time, have become specialists in a certain area of, what I think about is like the corporate finance curve or the business curve, right? From the very first like pre-seed, like we're in the garage moment to like we raised 100K to, we raised some seed money and we got to a Series A or whatever the metrics are and maybe there are certain people who are really good at that part of the journey, and then they're looking to repeat that with success, right? And they're really good through like Series B or something. And then there are other people who are used to getting on at the midway through a Series A and then kind of flow through a high degree of growth of a company. And so I kind of think about people in that continuum as well, particularly with regards to starting up, right? Whether it's like a traditional venture startup or if it's just a business, right? And you can kind of see in people's background and the difference between real background and recommendation versus the aspirational side. And I think as long as there's clarity between those two things, what's aspirational and what, then you can kind of true that out and suss it out a little bit more.
Very interesting. So you did mention, bringing people are unique, the self that they bring to the table. And we've talked before about bringing your best self, being present. How do you find that in a startup environment where the journey does change? And also there may be some of that, oh, well, I'm supposed to be this person at this stage, or I'm supposed to be this person to be to maintain my status as a founder and not get kicked out.
Wow. Yeah, that's yeah. I think, well, number one, I think that some of what you just asked, Christina, like for me, I think that's also a degree of societal pressure that's kind of misplaced at times, particularly during extreme good times when you have like, the market we've just been through in terms of, how startup, it's been very bullish, right? And with minor, maybe with lesser diligence controls, right? I think people have been a little looser, a little faster, more founder friendly. And so that type of, I think about that in terms of status, right? Achieved versus ascribed. Let's go back to our cross-cultural values, right? What I'm hearing you ask is like that difference between where the transom is between ascribed versus achieved, right? And I think when you show up with your most authentic self, your true self, and where you're willing to look at your greatest competitor, yourself in the mirror each day, you'll know when there's a degree of ascription versus achieved, and you try to find that with people, right? Does it really matter to them? I find that the people who are really busy, like getting a lot of, what's the old expression, get shit done, right? They're the ones that are really getting things done. You have a lot less of that, right? Because the achievement's there, and so are the failures, by the way, right? And so people are afraid of failing than maybe the early stage kind of, young corporate culture, it might not really be for them, because you have to have a degree of risk appetite, and you have to be okay with being wrong all the time. It's like, it's kind of like learning a foreign language. Guess what? It's an opportunity to be wrong 99% of the time until you start to become slightly more correct. Right? And because you have to grow, and you have to make a lot of mistakes in order to find the success out of that.
I distinctly remember making up a couple of Spanish words in the middle of an oral exam one time, and then realizing it as it happened. So definitely can relate to the foreign language portion. So I love that you mentioned failure too, because that's just, it's inherent. Eventually you're going to have mistakes. There's going to be things that go well, don't go well. What would you have to say as far as any comfort maybe you could give, or just general thoughts on failure for people who are starting out? Maybe they're worried they have had a failure before, but they want to, go try again, want to have an investment. How do those conversations go if you have people who want investments that maybe the previous venture didn't work out, or how does that factor in?
Gosh, I think that's something I like to call experience, right? People, what is that very perhaps overused, even Wayne Gretzky quote: "You don't make 100% of the shots you never take," right? And it's so true. So if somebody's iterating, collaborating, you want to look at how they've been iterating, collaborating, and how thoughtful they've been about why things broke down. But then when failure, and by the way, I've never met an investor who hasn't hung on too long. Gosh, no, I sure have. I've been both as an employee, as a, oh my gosh, the amount of failures, and they're everywhere. It's the stuff that's in your book of lessons learned, right? So it's like, hopefully through all that iteration, you can get down a path where, like, oh gosh, okay, this is why this time is kind of actually might be different, and why, right? And there's a tendency to shy away from something like that. But I think that when I meet people who have just iterated and finally start to make a breakthrough, it's pretty amazing, right? I encourage people to, if they're going to fail, fail as quickly as possible so that they can get to the successful part. And I think the other side of that is lots of founders and founding teams and young companies, they think that people who make investments don't fail. Oh yeah, all the time. And so it's like, my kids ask me what I do. I'm like, I spend a lot of time failing. Like, no, Dad, come on. It's like, no. Oh yeah, welcome to life. So
it's a good lesson for them to hear.
It is. I heard it, a while back. It was last year. Why do I need to? Who cares about chemistry? You never even ever used that. And I'm like, oh, well, actually, let me tell you. Right? You'd be surprised why that's important from high school all the way into your professional career, because you never know when you have to pick something up and learn it quickly. I'm a strong believer in being a lifelong learner. You can never stop learning. Every day is incredibly humbling. Being around a lot of the people I'm fortunate enough to work with, because there's so, part of our theme is like, science is sexy, right? And when you combine that with the people flow, you can imagine some of these conversations. And as a non-technical person in some ways, other than finance, I'm just like, wow, I've got a lot of reading to do tonight, right? So, just to hang on.
That's great describing it. And I've had a lot of mixed results in trying to impart that upon people who are of school age, because school is so, this is what you're learning right now, and there's easy success or failure, and it's all based on what you know in the test. And it is very much like failure is not rewarded. It is not, even though it is what we think of as the learning time of our lives, learning is not also necessarily rewarded if it's all towards tests. And it's just interesting to see that play out. And then we swing everybody into the business world where it's like, no, you're going to go fail a lot. That's going to be what it's going to feel like. So I don't know. It seems like a kind of disingenuous way we people up for how life is.
Oh my gosh, I think about that so many times as well. And that's why, grading really matters, particularly at a university level. it should be as honest and true and as objective as possible. Although it's ultimately all decisions are subjective in life, right? But it takes a lot to realize that when you get in your professional career, oh my gosh, as long as I'm more than 50% on something, I'm in the plus column, right? I totally agree. And nobody tells you, by the way. Nobody tells you. You have to learn that.
Yep. Yeah, but it's a really good point. This whole, you go into work and you go into a culture, and it's, especially lately, it's all about, fail forward. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to take risks. And, the pre-work timeline is, well, when you fail, you don't pass. And if you don't pass, you're left behind and you can't go to college and all these things. So you're never taught that failure is the way to go, or that it's okay. And even in business, a lot of times it's lip service, because the minute you do make a mistake, then you're publicly shamed or there's consequences. So it's like, so you tell me to fail and risk, but then when I do, I'm punished. Not exactly motivating.
Yeah.
Don't fear failure, but I'll give you something to fear.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and I think, understanding that, we have this tendency. We can talk about how a company or a situation like that can be more than the people in it, which it is, right? Because, as we like to say, it's the square of the nodes thinking, Metcalfe's law. So, if you're 4 versus 1, that's pretty amazing, right? I mean, you got the power of 4 versus the power of 1 in terms of like founders or whoever's starting it. And I think that when I think about that, failure, it's probably one of the most difficult things in life to handle. But when people fail, it doesn't mean that they failed as humans, right? It didn't mean that oh my God, they went out and they gave it their best shot. And okay, what's the next move, right? How do you wind that down? It's about how you support each other through that, I think. And I don't disagree. This whole the public forum, it can be incredibly harsh on people. But what I find behind at least our approach and the way we like to approach things, it's much more about the compassionate side. I mean, it's hard doing stuff that trying to address some of the biggest problems that you think are facing humanity, and then to feel comfortable enough to let your freak flag fly and be your ultimate outlier self, the outcast, and then to have it not work out, man, that's conviction, right? And you have to, as someone who works with founders, I mean, I feel like all I can do is try to support them even more once that's happened, right? Because you have to, right? I mean, plenty of times in my career, I've been the outcast. I've been the outlier. Like someone say, no, that's nuts. Like, then usually what I learned over time is, oh, maybe I'm starting to get to the right track, right? people think this is really unconventional. Okay, how unconventional is it? So, and you have to, nurture and support those people. And that's why an ecosystem of people who have good values is really important, right? You don't want to fail with a bunch of people who are going to just kick you to the curb once, it didn't work out, whatever,
So true. So what does it take to live in your values?
What does it take to what?
Live in your values.
Oh, man. It takes somebody like me I'm usually trying to multitask when I shouldn't. And I'm trying to, I'm serious, right? Like it takes a lot of focus and intention. It takes a lot of practice. I can't say that I'm really great at it, right? I think we all struggle with it from time to time, but I think trying to be as present as possible, and that can almost sound cliche nowadays, but truly, like, you're here. This is what's happening right now. There isn't anything, the past and the future, whatever, did the past really happen? I don't know. Did it? I guess it did. But the future is, okay, we know nothing about it because we're creating it as we're in the present. So you can kind of either look up and be part of that, right? And then I think that helps you be your most authentic self and bring your pure values. I think that's about the only way I know how to do that. I know that it's easy to run into issues with values misalignment when people aren't present, when they're distracted, and then later on they say, "Ooh, I didn't mean for that to happen," right? Or I'm just as guilty as anybody else of that. And so, being here on this conversation we're having today, right? You have to focus and you have to be there. Otherwise, you can't bring your truest values, your pure values, your good values. At least not for me. And that starts with intent and how I kind of set up my day, and I look about it and think about, okay, how am I going to be the best possible version of myself for those people at that time, right? And
it's hard work.
Yeah, and then probably more importantly, how am I going to be the best possible version of myself for myself? Sounds selfish, egotistical, but I know from experience that if I don't try to do that first, I can't do the other things. Friends, family, all these people. I'd emotionally and energy bankrupt by the end of the day.
It's the oxygen mask. Put yours first on.
Absolutely. I mean, how do you guys do it? I mean, how do you bring that self in each day?
I say very, very similarly, meaning intentionally embracing the failures, not giving up or deflating or self-blaming when I don't do that. So a lot of self-awareness, a lot of self-compassion, and just those moments of pause to reflect back when the best moments are not met, and to reflect on the best moments. What worked well? What did I do to set myself up to show up as my best self in that moment? Having a podcast where we talk about this stuff helps
really
a lot.
helpful.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm a big person of integrity being a big value. So if I say something and it's out there in public and then I don't do it, I definitely have a lot of internal disturbance that I don't want to deal with. So
I would be not a joke to say that Christina and I have at least 20 times, probably a year at this point, texted each other to be like, yeah, okay, we do need to do the thing right here that we have talked about dozens of times in public. Like, now's the challenge. Now we rise to it. And it sneaks up on you sometimes because there's reason and there's feeling not to. You want to, I don't know, protect yourself, or you want to be right, or you want to not have been wrong, or whatever's coming up. You want to do that. And there's been many times we have to remind ourselves, like, right, this is why we talk about these things, and this is why we want to share this. And it's honestly, it has helped me tremendously that we have this many conversations, because it's the repetition and the understanding. And I loved your answer, Bill, for like being present. That is a great way of doing it. I feel like personally I had to back my way into that one. I started a lot more with like Christina, we were talking about this before we started recording, but she was talking about you process emotions, you figure out where that is in your body, right? So there's a lot of that backing in and being like, okay, wait, how am I feeling right now? And then starting to get in touch with, oh, okay, I can recognize this feeling from a previous moment of self-reflection. And that's where you slowly, by inspecting and reflecting on the past and what was the present then, it's a lot easier to be present now. And then you can get a little bit more ahead of, oh, I'm starting to feel the drift. I'm starting to feel the pull where maybe I'm not lined up. This doesn't feel right. And it might take a little bit to go investigate and get that back in track. But I think being present is a great answer for that. And I hadn't really thought of it in those words before, but that's the goal. Set that intention at the time.
Finding center, right? It's not always so obvious. Not so obvious when, but what's the definition of center really? I mean, are we talking 3 dimensions, or what do we, I mean, seriously, like what is center, right?
Yeah.
And I think we all, intention is everything, right? At least for me, and then it's quickly followed by the action, right? Of being present and focusing. And when I can, have those serendipitous moments, it leads to, it can lead to a real state of flow, right? Some of the conversations I have, I just feel very fortunate to be with the other people in that. Like I had a diligence call for an interesting company with some interesting, human potential tech out of Denmark. And the guy I was speaking to was doing due diligence from Vancouver. And it was like, it's the highlight of my day, right? I mean, and this is obviously really cool too, right? It's going to be a big highlight too. But up until that point, I was like, wow, I showed up and we just, we went through the conversation. It was honest it was revealing, where we thought, the shortcomings, but also the positive things and the people involved. And you have to, you can't fake these things, right? I guess you could, but I don't know why you would.
Yeah. I think a lot of people try to fake them.
You do?
Yeah.
I'd say they do.
The bill tends to come due.
Yeah.
Push it off for a bit, but it'll come for you.
Yeah, I don't really have a lot of time for that. I know from personal experience that this can be really fleeting. Life is fragile, and truly, the world doesn't owe you anything, right? And so, if you give first and you start to help people, and that's your original intent, and that helps you be present, it's amazing the degree of people flow. Now we're talking about a different type of flow, right? We're not just talking about like people coming through, but like the flow, the collective consciousness, the consciousness of yourself and others around you, and being present in that moment. It's pretty special, but it takes an awful lot of work. We talk a lot about iteration and collaboration and getting people together who are really domain experts, like off the charts and whatever it is they're doing, if it's rockets or nutrition or whatever, food tech, whatever it is. And being able to step back and help facilitate those people into that state of flow together and try to tackle some of these larger problems facing humanity. I think we're faced with them constantly. We all know what they are, right? Climate change, food, conflict, operating systems, if we want to go that far, and how you can work together to propel humanity forward in a positive direction. That's when you talk about values and intent and purpose and being present, man, that's a privilege to be able to be a part of that, and work with one another. And if you're faking something, then it's pretty hard to stick around.
Yes.
Right. And I just it's pretty amazing. Like I said earlier, I feel like I've had just such an amazing opportunity to work with so many brilliant people throughout my career that I just learned from. Maybe I'm a hitchhiker, I don't know. But I just and that's really what that's about, bringing that authentic self, at least to me. That's what like this conversation here, right? And the conversations we've had leading up to this.
Well, I think you could definitely, when people do bring their authentic selves, and that's the stage, that's the intention from all sides, there's just something way bigger than any individual that gets created, that then the individuals learn from and grow from. And you can let go of the ego, in the sense of the worrying what's in it for me, and just realize this is way bigger than what's in it for me. This is not about what's in it for me. What's in it for me is the experience, not the outcome.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And the outcome will happen.
Yep. The outcome will happen.
Right. And it's going to, and I perhaps naively so, I'll say it's going to be beautiful and it's going to be just the way it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
But I have to believe that. I agree with you, Christina, that experience, that journey, it's like, yeah.
And that's an interesting point through values too, because not only is it the experience, and that happens all the time. If the outcome, if and when it comes along, is can be like a moment in time. That might be a one-time thing, but it will be in the future regardless. And you have to experience all the pieces in between. But you also then have to honestly interrogate yourself on whether you're pushing towards that outcome. Are you living in the values there, or are you living in different values? So I was just listening to some podcast with Ray Dalio on it and talking about they have like radical transparency, and they want to have like really good feedback because they want to get things right rather than just protect themselves. And it does kind of fall back to things like that. That if your value is to feel important to be protected, that may come at the cost of being able to deliver more for the larger picture. Are that more honest, more whatever feedback that might feel uncomfortable in the moment, is that might be better serving the long goal and moving more towards the actual outcome. Then it becomes a value question.
It sounds a lot like acceleration through failure to get to the successes, right?
Yeah.
And being comfortable with failure, right? To kind of come back full circle here and think about that from another angle too. I read that as well, and I thought, it's fascinating because that has not, again, to Christina. Well, you brought it up, Christina, I think at the beginning of the podcast about we go through university and no one's teaching, or maybe you said, Alex. Anyway, that was a while ago. But 20 minutes
we're in this
ago.
moment now. It's fine.
But we're in this moment, so let's not get bogged down by some details. Although they matter, right? No, but seriously, it's that whole okay, get the pass, get an A+, get an A+. Okay, get ready to fail a lot.
A lot of F's.
Yeah, that's right. Just don't tell your children, right?
Classes have grades, but life is mostly pass fail. It's got 50% mark.
And even when you think you're passing, somebody else can come around and tell you failed. So there you go.
Yeah, right. There you go.
And even when you're failing, you can build towards a pass.
Actually, you're passing. Yes.
That's how you eventually get there.
Well, you can set a lot of those goalposts yourself too, right? We all do that in our own way, I suppose. And then there are stages. There are different stages of growth in life, and we talk about being present. But I truly, if you're not going to get hung up on the past, you can only look forward and be here right now and be like, okay, I'm going to do this. Maybe that'll happen in the future. Maybe it won't, but let's be as positive about it as we can and accelerate through it. And, it's funny. This is such a deeper conversation about the kinds of things we look for in people around us. And it has, I happen to work with early stage companies. You all work with a lot of change management and different people and organizations that are really, living, growing things that are people all together that really all matter. And, we're all kind of passing through those points in time. And it's really, at the end of the day, those other things, change management or venture capital or startup, those are just labels, really.
They are.
Totally.
They really are. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely an exercise in remembering the people flow of things. Because there are some moments where it would be easier to just say like, well, yeah, like you go back into your corner. We don't really care about you here. And it's a little bit harder when you're in change management and you have those moments where you want to say that and like, okay, but that kind of defeats the purpose of why we're here and it's not going to get us anywhere. So let's find a different way, because all points of view are valid and whatever is triggering needs to be addressed.
Absolutely.
interesting to think about the people flow of your own life too, because that's easy to lose. Sometimes we feel like we have to build in a career or build in a towards something specific, but we are flowing in and out of organizations, in and out of our own values changes, life changes. You know, if you have a family now, that's now a huge priority. You have this now, that's now the number one priority, and could have been something that was entirely antithetical to who you were before, but now you're here. And if you're not again present and acknowledging that, like, it's easy to lose your own person flow in that. It's easy to lose your own direction. And we're all going to do it sometimes, but it's something, again, to kind of keep in mind of just being back and present, because you'll lose yourself just as much as you'll watch other people be lost.
Yeah. Yeah, you got me. You kind of blew my mind with the last one. It's a podcast, so that I'm like, the look on my face here. I just, well, no, I mean, like, I just saw chapters in the book going by like over like 20 years or something. And you're thinking about that, right? You're thinking about all the, you know, the interwoven fabric that are relationships and in your life, and how, and you know, given the context and how it all comes together. And I think, you know, it's interesting. The other day I was reading something, some article somewhere about, you know, what was it say? It said something like why HR wants to know how you're feeling, kind of thing. And it was, and there were people, and it might have been the Wall Street Journal even, and people, you know, were basically saying, you know, why is my boss asking me how I feel, kind of thing, right? Or boss, that's an antiquated word. Talk about anachronistic. And I just, you know, it's interesting. We're just people, right? I mean, if we lose some of this hierarchy and we just think about that, we're just people. And we have, you know, we have a home operation mode, family front, or whatever our off cycle mode is away from the office. And then however we interact with our colleagues, but you have to be respectful of not, you know, respecting that people and their lives. These are icebergs, right? Most of the time we just see the very top. We don't really have any idea what other people are going through. And to not be intentional and authentic and compassionate would be wrong.
Well, and as you said, it has to be for the self too. So the compassion and the presence and the empathy and the reflection, it's needed for the self. If you're not compassionate with yourself and take those pauses and understand what's going on and look at your own, you know, work and life and family and social and armors and not armors and whatever is going on, it's so much harder to do it for others.
Yeah, it really is. If you don't do it for yourself, you know, and it's what's the old, you know, what did you know, your parents said, you know, you are who you run around with, kind of thing, right? And it's you know, recently I was in an event that was, you know, somewhat traumatic, and a colleague of mine, we were supposed to have a follow-up diligence call on something. And he said, "Hey, wait a minute. You know, you really shouldn't be working right now." He's like, "We can do this later." I'm like, "What do you mean?" It's like, "Why don't you? How are you feeling? How do you?" And I mean, by the end of it, you know, we spent 45 minutes of this meeting with him, kind of like coaching me through what I probably needed to do, and saying, "Okay, well, let's tie off 10 minutes about this other subject, and then why don't you go home?" And you know what? I did. I went home. I was like, yeah, I took 2 days off, you know, and it was probably the best, you know, nudge in the direction of self-love, compassion, starting with self so you can love others, that anybody could have given me. And guess what? It started with someone at work.
It can happen. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah. They exist. The humans at work.
Yeah. So, and it's you know, it's that people flow, right? And allowing that to happen, and to have those open conversations around these things. It's not necessarily that you have to divulge your deepest secrets or what.
Mhm.
Just how you feel, right?
Mhm.
We're in this new hybrid world, right? And everyone's. I find it fascinating that when I read the popular press or what I read a lot, and I always have, but I'm hearing people speak about like what the new normal really is. Like there's we're fighting to get back to where we were before the pandemic. What? No, we're not. Nobody's doing. Whoever's fighting for that, I'll tell you, misplaced. But I think because that's not this exponential movement, square of the nodes
Mhm.
thinking of, the push towards hyper enabling exponential change in society, in business place, wherever,
Mhm.
for yourself, right? Because it's like this languishing curve, and then suddenly it goes up. You have to wait. And here we are in this amazing moment where we're at the beginning of that curve and redefining these types of relationships and a better balance between the mind and the body. And, that's something else we look for. When I think about people I want to work with and be around, we could take these other labels, investment, change, all these things, right? But let's just face it. We want other people who also understand this, evolving situation that is
Mhm.
being present in this new hybrid world. We're on a Zoom recording a podcast,
Mhm.
and we're all in completely different locations. It's awesome. It's authentic. It's very real. And it didn't inconvenience anybody. And afterwards, someone's gonna, I'm gonna go probably make somebody dinner. Someone else might go work out. Somebody,
Yeah.
I don't know. And we're gonna feel much better about ourselves and the time we spent together because of that. It'll be more meaningful.
Huh. I love the story you had about your coworker who asked you just how you're feeling. It's interesting, at least in my experience. I don't mean to put too many words about your experience into this, but I've only had a couple of those moments where something will shine through, and then suddenly you realize this like barrier you had between this work idea and the rest of you is actually not there, and it really helps if that can be like somebody inside of work being like, hey, hey, there's you out there, and you're like, right, that's me too. Let's go reconnect. But that's to your point. That's who you want to work with, because nothing is generally so urgent that it has to be answered in 2 hours. So if what you're feeling is that you're brain dead and you could really use a day, 2 days, an hour even, it's going to be so much better to take that time than that takes that understanding from a team that's willing to do that. And that's such a great way of describing it. Is it's exactly why you want those people around, because that's what you get that freedom to then do the things you want to do and the things you want to do. You get both ends of the stick here, and it's a much nicer way of doing it. That's how I feel personally and strongly, but I guess there's lots of other philosophies, I'm sure, on how people want work to work.
And I feel I couldn't agree more completely. I think it also leads to your willingness to be able to be open to fail a little and have discussions where, okay, that didn't fit, throw it out, whatever, what's the next thing, keep going, right? And that leads to better collaboration, and you actually get more done in the long run because you addressed it rather than, what did you say, Christina, put it on the armor. And no, that didn't happen. No, that's not me. I'm fine. I'm not
Fine.
right.
Definitely.
It comes down so much to how much you attach it to the person, right? If that failure might just be like, it was an experiment. Like if we can all agree like that we wanted to try that, and that didn't work out, and maybe we can feel bummed about the money, the time, whatever was spent on that. But as long as you keep that separation, instead of being like, oh, remember how Bill suggested that? Like, let's all make sure Bill feels bad for this. Like, then you're gonna like take this whole totally different direction. Now failure is not rewarded. Failure. This is no longer an experiment. This is an issue.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. You're so right. You're so right. But that's why building that sense of community, it's taken a long time. My partner, Jean Paul, who you all met, a while back. This guy, together with other people, helped to launch this amazing community where that's okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
Iterating through that and failing forward, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
What's the And by the way, this exponential thinking, and if we're thinking about moonshots, loon shots, or whatever the purpose is and the intention of your marrying your own core purpose together with what it is you're working on, can be really valuable. It can be really incredible, and it can be an incredible experience collectively, individually as well as part of the collective. And through that, you will find that empathy, and some of that failure is going to happen no matter what anyway, right? And if you don't go out, step out and do it, guess what? Someone else is going to try to do it, and guess what? They're also going to fail at certain things, right?
Yeah.
And someone else will be suggesting it. Maybe that's Bob, right? So yeah. Would you give up that opportunity to not be present? That's what I think about when we look at a lot of different things, and there, how you spend your time. It's so finite, and you never know. Here today, gone tomorrow. It's very fragile. Can be gone in a second.
Yeah.
Make it count.
Yeah.
You owe it to yourself and to the people around you to make every moment count.
Yeah, really do. Yeah. Well, clearly we could talk for days, weeks, years. Maybe we will. We do have a couple of questions for you as we wrap up. One of them is, what does authenticity mean to you?
To me, it means bringing your highest, best self at all times, even when you don't want to, or you don't feel like you can, and still sticking your neck out to do that.
Oh, that, especially when you don't want to or feel like it. That's a big one.
The real conviction.
Yes.
Yeah. Which there's a lot of times you don't feel like it.
Yeah, especially as a
parent.
parent.
It's okay to not feel like that. It's just part of it. It doesn't mean it's not authentic. It just means it feels hard.
Yeah.
Like the 2 days before a presentation, you realize you haven't finished the slides, and you're like, oh wait, but I did that in my head. Oh wait a minute, hold on.
Yeah.
I really don't want to do that, but you still have to, right?
Yeah. Always do it in the head, and somehow it's not translating. Microsoft needs to come up with that one.
Yeah, they've got a long way to go.
Yeah, plug it in my head, create the vision. Why do I have to sit down and type it?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So the final question then is, where can people find you? What would you like to plug?
Yes.
Where can they find me?
Yes.
Yeah.
They can. They have a few different places that they can find me. Up in the lab in our ecosystem up in Boulder, where we have the intersection of art and science with in-house artists and all kinds of science type people, as well as human performance and human potential. And at Black Lab up in Boulder, that's the shameless plug. I think
plug away.
Yeah, it's like if people are interested in trying to really address and then seriously address and discuss, some of the biggest issues facing humanity, you're welcome. Come on in. We're all ears. We want to hear about it. We don't care if you're in Kigali, where my business partner JP is right now at the at BAL at the African Basketball League with the NBA, or you're in, I don't know, Washington State somewhere. It's just, having these conversations, the only difference is that situation or that place. It's just as important every place, right? And so come one, come all, thinker doers, builders, master builders, other creators. These are our people. You're welcome to come in anytime. We'll listen to whatever you want to talk about and see how you fit in our community.
It's a great place. Highly recommend.
Yeah, it's very fun.
Yeah.
Love the place. Love the mission.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, thanks so much for having me today. This has
you.
been a while in the making. I really appreciate both of you and your time. And this was a lot of fun today.
It was worth the wait.
Great. Thank you so much, Bill.
Thank you.